62 episodes. That's the whole thing. That's Breaking Bad, start to finish, no padding, no filler seasons, no year where everyone's clearly waiting for the writers to figure something out. 62. And somehow that tiny little show has generated more theorizing than franchises 10 times its size. People are still finding things in it, still pausing frames, still arguing about a pizza, so that's tonight, 100 of them. Some are properly confirmed, straight from Vince Gilligan's mouth or hidden in the set design. Some are fan theories with actual evidence behind them, and some are complete nonsense that I love anyway and refuse to leave out. If you like this sort of thing and you haven't subscribed, that'd be lovely. No pressure. I'll be here either way. There's no particular order to worry about and nothing you need to keep hold of. Each one's its own little thing. Wander off whenever you like. Right. Let's start with the big ones, mostly so we can get them out of the way. Theory number 1. Breaking Bad is a nightmare Hal is having in Malcolm in the Middle. I know, it's a daft one, and the logic is thin, and it's basically just Bryan Cranston was in both, which is not evidence of anything. But fans committed to it so hard that the show sort of ran with it. Tucked into the complete series box set is an alternate ending where Hal wakes up in bed next to Lois and starts telling her about this mad dream he had, about being a chemistry teacher who cooked meth. It's played entirely for laughs. It is not canon, and yet it exists, which means a joke theory got itself filmed. Cranston himself got asked about it on Fallon and did the whole bit about not being at liberty to disclose without security clearance before landing on, Walter White is definitely dead. He's dead, he's dead, he's dead. 3 times. He was quite keen on that point. Theory number 2, and this is the famous one. Walt froze to death in that Volvo in New Hampshire, and the entire finale is a dying man's fantasy. The case is better than you'd think. Emily Nussbaum wrote about it in The New Yorker, and Norm Macdonald ran with it on Twitter, and once you've heard it, you can't quite shake it. Walt's sitting in a snowed-in car with police lights sweeping past. He can't start it. He says a small prayer, basically. And then the keys drop out of the sun visor into his lap. From that moment on, everything goes his way. He walks into the Schwartz's house unchallenged. He sits in a diner as the most wanted man in America and chats to a waitress. He gets his money to his family, kills every enemy, saves Jesse, and dies on his own terms in a lab, which is the only place he was ever happy. It's tidy. Breaking Bad was never tidy. Gilligan has said no, repeatedly and plainly. It happened, but I understand why people wanted it not to. Theory number 3 is related, but genuinely separate, and people conflate them constantly. This one says Walt survives the finale entirely. James Hamblin, who's a doctor as well as a writer, argued in The Atlantic that the wound Walt takes isn't obviously fatal, abdominal, ricochet, and he's lying in a building that is about to be crawling with paramedics because the police are already pulling up outside. He'd have a decent shot. The theory is that Walt gets patched up, gets arrested, and spends whatever's left of his lungs in a federal hospital bed. Cranston has said no. The script says no. But medically, it's not the daftest thing anyone's ever suggested. Theory number 4. Breaking Bad is the Faust story with a lab coat on. This is an old reading, and it holds up better than most. A learned man, frustrated by how little his learning has got him, makes a bargain that gives him power in exchange for the thing he can't get back. That's the shape of Faust, and it's the shape of this. Walt's version is deeper than the original because nobody has to turn up in a cloak. The bargain is with the cancer. He's given a deadline and told what it's worth, and he decides that a man with a fixed expiry date is a man who no longer has to behave. Everything he does afterwards is spending time he's already been told he doesn't have. Some people push it further and cast Gus as the tempter, offering the lab, the money, the legitimacy, all of it perfectly reasonable, and all of it a trap. I think that's a stretch, because Gus isn't offering Walt anything Walt hasn't already decided he wants. What I do think holds is the ending. Faust doesn't get away with it, and neither does this one. only Breaking Bad ends with a man alone in the room where he did the work. Theory number 5 is where things get properly unsettling, and it might be the best evidence fan theory the show has. Walt absorbs the habits of the people he kills. Crazy 8 has his sandwich with the crust cut off once. After Walt strangles him, Walt starts eating crustless sandwiches. Mike takes his whiskey a particular way, and after Mike dies, Walt's order changes to match. Gus, when he's making himself throw up before the tequila scene, carefully lays a towel down on the bathroom floor first. And later, after Gus is dead, Walt does the exact same thing. Towel down, then vomit. Nobody in the show comments on any of it. There's no scene where someone goes, "Hang on, why are you doing that?" It just accumulates in the background like a stain. And once you've noticed it, Walt stops looking like a man who broke bad and starts looking like something that collects people. Theory number 6, and this one's less a theory than a reading, but it's the reading that changed the show for me. Walt was always Heisenberg. The cancer didn't create him, it just removed his last excuse not to be. The comfortable version of Breaking Bad is a good man corrupted by circumstance. Mr. Chips to Scarface, as Gilligan famously pitched it. But watch the pilot again with this in mind. The resentment is already fully formed. The contempt for his students, his boss, his brother-in-law, his own life. He isn't a happy man who gets bad news. He's a furious man who gets permission. I don't think the cancer transformed him. I think it deregulated him. Theory number 7 is my favorite of the silly ones. The entire series is a story invented by Walt's chemistry students to explain why he keeps missing lessons. That's it. That's the theory. Mr. White's off again, so the bored kids in 4th period start making things up, and each version gets more elaborate. Gus is just the bloke who owns the chicken place down the road. Jesse's an older kid, a few of them vaguely remember. The story spirals because teenagers are relentless. There's zero evidence. It's just a nice thought, and I include it because after 5 seasons of that much misery, someone deciding the whole thing was made up by children is a genuinely sweet impulse. Theory number 8. Nothing is Jesse's dream. The series plays out as objective reality. And I'll be honest with you, this one doesn't work. It's the Walt version of Theory 2 with the name swapped, and it doesn't have any of the supporting texture. There are several moments where Jesse's perspective takes over. There's whole seasons he isn't in the room for. He doesn't know about gray matter, he doesn't know what Gus and Hector were to each other, and you can't dream detail you've never had access to. I mention it because it comes up constantly, and I think it's worth saying plainly when something doesn't hold. Not everything needs defending. Theory number 9 is the one where I have to put my hand over my mouth. Mike Ehrmantraut is not Jesse Pinkman from the future, but a completely separate character with his own backstory. The idea is that an older Jesse has come back to steer his younger self away from the road he's on, and that's why Mike, who has no patience for junkies at all, keeps ending up as the one adult who actually looks after him. Some versions extend it so that Gus and Gale are also time travelers, and when Gale gets shot, the future timeline collapses, which is why Mike stops being able to predict anything after that point. It falls apart the second you remember that Mike has a daughter-in-law and a granddaughter and a whole dead son and a career as a corrupt Philadelphia cop. But there's something in it, isn't there? Something about how the show gave Jesse exactly one good father figure and made him the one who dies on a riverbank. Theory number 10, and this one's just a lovely bit of structural discipline. Walt is told at diagnosis that in the best case he has 2 years. He dies almost exactly 2 years later on his 52nd birthday of a bullet. The show set a clock in the first 20 minutes and then honored it, which almost no television does. The cancer never actually kills him. It just tells him how long he's got, and the show delivers him to that date on the nose by a completely different route. That's the sort of thing that only reads as deliberate on a rewatch, and it's one of the reasons the whole series feels tighter than it has any right to. Now, most of that lot are about the show as a shape. The stranger material starts when you stop looking at the series and start looking at the man. Before we go on, something that's worth saying once and then leaving alone. There's a particular kind of fan theory that only exists because a show is good. Bad television doesn't generate this. Nobody sits up at 2 a.m. arguing about the internal chronology of a program they didn't like. The theories are a symptom of care, and they cluster around specific things, gaps, repetitions, and objects that stay on screen slightly too long. Breaking Bad has a very unusual profile in that respect because it's a short show with an enormous amount of deliberate design and almost no mythology. There's no secret organization, no prophecy, no hidden world. Everything that happens is chemistry, money, and people being stubborn, which means the theorizing has nowhere to go except inwards, into the frame itself, into the wallpaper and the shirts and the number of episodes. Compare that to the big mythology shows, the ones built on a giant unexplained event and a map full of places you never visit. Those generate outward-facing theories. Where did it come from? What's over there? Who else is out there? What's the organization behind the organization? The speculation runs away from the screen and into the parts of the world the cameras never reached. Breaking Bad has none of that. The question is never what happened. You watched what happened. The question is always why, and specifically why this man, and the show is quite happy to let you sit with that and never fully resolve it. So the theories go strange, they become forensic. People start counting how many times somebody eats a sandwich, and I think that's genuinely lovely in a slightly unhinged way because it means the show trained an entire audience to watch the background of a frame the way Hank looks at evidence. There's also a fairly clear split in what people are doing with them, and I notice it more the longer I spend in these threads. Some theories are attempts to find hidden design, the chessboard, the episode titles, the color work. These are essentially archaeology. They assume somebody buried something, and the job is to dig it up. And quite often they're right. The other sort are attempts to fix something. The dream theory, the Jesse never made it theory, the Walt Jr. becomes Heisenberg predictions. Those aren't archaeology. Those are people rewriting an ending they found emotionally wrong, which is a completely legitimate thing to do with a story. I just think it's worth being honest that it's what's happening. Nobody constructs a theory that the ending was secretly worse unless they wanted the ending to be worse. Anyway, both kinds are in this video, and I'll keep flagging which is which as we go, because I think the difference is half the fun. Theory number 11 starts with a hat, because everything about Walt eventually does. The pork pie hat wasn't in any script for a long time. Bryan Cranston kept asking for one. He wanted it early, he wanted it in season 1, and the answer kept coming back no, because Jesse was the one who wore hats. Gilligan held it back until he could find a moment in the story where a hat would actually mean something. And he found it. Walt puts it on when he walks into Tuco's office and introduces himself as Heisenberg for the first time. It isn't costume, it's a mask he chose, which means the most iconic piece of clothing in modern television exists because an actor kept nagging and a writer kept saying not yet. I think about that a lot, actually, how much of what we think of as design is really just someone being patient. Theory number 12. Gray matter is named for the two men who built it and the thing they made together. Schwartz is German for black. White is white. Put them together and you get gray. The company Walt walked away from is literally named after a partnership, and he sold his half of that name for $5,000 and spent the next 20 years watching it turn into billions. It's a bit on the nose, and I mean that as a compliment. This show is full of names that are doing extra work. Theory number 13 is the question the fandom has never accepted an answer to. Why did Walt actually leave gray matter? The official answer is fairly mundane. Gilligan has said it outright, and Jessica Hecht, who plays Gretchen, has said the same. Walt went away for the 4th of July with Gretchen's family, discovered they were seriously wealthy and seriously established, felt small, and bolted. Ended the relationship, sold his stake, took a teaching job. No betrayal, no theft, just a proud man who couldn't tolerate feeling like the poor boyfriend. Fans have never liked that. So there are alternatives. There's a version where Walt finds letters proving Gretchen and Elliot were already involved. There's a version, and I promise I'm not making this up, where Gretchen turns out to be his half-sister and it's all a bit Star Wars. Both of those are entirely invented. Both of them are more popular than the truth, which tells you something about how badly we all wanted Walt to have been genuinely wronged. Theory number 14. The pride was the terminal illness. The cancer was a side plot. Elliot offers to pay for the treatment, outright, no strings, at a birthday party in front of everyone. Then he offers Walt a job with insurance, which would have covered the treatment and left something behind for the family afterwards. Walt turns down both. Every awful thing that follows proceeds from that refusal. And the ending twists the knife on it, because Walt's remaining money reaches his son through the Schwartzes anyway. He spends everything he has and dozens of lives in order to end up back at the exact charity he refused in episode 5. He just made it cost more. Theory number 15 is a chemistry lesson that turns out to be a character study. In season 1, Walt teaches his class about chirality, molecules that have identical atoms in identical quantities but are structured as mirror images and which behave completely differently as a result. One version does what you want, the other version doesn't. Same ingredients, opposite outcome. He is describing himself roughly 4 years before he becomes it. Heisenberg is made of exactly the same material as Walter White. Same intelligence, same precision, same stubbornness, just flipped. And the show put that on a blackboard in front of a room of teenagers who weren't listening, which is possibly the most Breaking Bad thing that ever happened. Theory number 16 is one line and it's easy to miss. Season 1, Walt thinks he's about to be arrested and he records a confession tape on a camcorder in the desert. Before he says anything else, he specifies that this is not an admission of guilt. He's addressing his family and he's already lawyering. That instinct never goes away. Every subsequent confession Walt makes is engineered. The tape he uses to blackmail Hank. The phone call during Ozymandias that's really a performance for the police. Walt never confesses, he only ever produces documents. Theory number 17. The clothing shop. Walt Jr.'s trying on trousers and some lads start taking the mickey about his legs. And Walt doesn't defuse it and he doesn't call security. He walks over, kicks the ringleader's leg out from under him, pins him down and holds him there. In a shop, before any of the crime, before any of the cancer really lands. That's not a good man under pressure. That's a man discovering he enjoys something. And the show puts it in the pilot on purpose, right where you'll forgive it. Theory number 18 is about a name on a fake ID. In the season 5 flash forwards, Walt's living under the name Lambert. That's Skylar's maiden name. At the time it aired, an enormous chunk of the fandom took that as proof that Walt was going to kill her, and that using her name was some kind of grim trophy in line with the habit collecting we talked about earlier. He doesn't kill her, obviously, and the mundane explanation is that Saul's guy would build an identity from a real name with a paper trail. But for about a year, a lot of people were absolutely convinced Skylar was doomed because of one word on a driving license. Theory number 19. The trousers in the desert were meant to look like a nappy. First cook, Walt strips down to his shirt and his underwear and starts working, and the whole image is faintly ridiculous. That was intentional. The production has talked about wanting him to look newborn out there, stumbling into a world he doesn't understand with nothing on. And the trousers stay on him the whole time and never end up under the wheels of a fire engine seasons later. The show never lets anything go. Theory number 20 is the thesis statement, and it's delivered in the first 10 minutes. Walt is at the blackboard defining chemistry. He says it's the study of change, growth, then decay, then transformation. He's being pedantic at a class that doesn't care. And he's also handing you the entire 5-season structure. Growth is seasons 1 through 3. Decay is season 4 into 5. Transformation is what happens in Ozymandias when everything he built collapses into the thing it always was. He said it out loud before anything happened, and I'd bet almost nobody watching on that first Sunday night in 2008 clocked it, right? Enough of him for the moment. Let's talk about the person the show was arguably always actually about. Since we've just spent a while on Walt, there's one thing worth pulling out on its own, and that's the name he chooses: Heisenberg. Werner Heisenberg, the German physicist, best known outside physics for the uncertainty principle, which in very rough terms says that there are pairs of properties you cannot both know precisely at the same time. Measure one accurately and the other blurs. Walt picks that. Out of every name available to a man inventing an alias, a chemistry teacher chooses the one that means you cannot be pinned down. There's a second layer that gets less attention. Heisenberg led the German nuclear program during the war, and historians have argued for decades about whether he was deliberately slowing it down or genuinely failing at it. His own account was that he was quietly obstructing. Others say he simply got the maths wrong and constructed a nobler story afterwards, which is, if you think about it, the exact shape of Walter White's entire self-narrative. A man doing something monstrous while maintaining an internal account in which he's the reasonable one, and the question of whether he believes it being genuinely impossible to resolve from outside. Fans have gone further with this than I'm comfortable with, incidentally. There's a whole thread of theorizing that connects the Heisenberg name to the actual Nazis in Season 5, Jack and the Aryan Brotherhood, and constructs some kind of intentional thematic architecture out of it. I think that's a stretch. I think Walt picked a physics name because he's the sort of man who thinks that's clever, and the show let him, because he is exactly the sort of man who thinks that's clever. But the uncertainty part, I do believe, is deliberate, because the show goes out of its way to make it work. You genuinely cannot get a fixed reading on Walt. Every time you think you've got him measured, the other property goes fuzzy. Is he a father or is he an addict? Is he a genius or is he lucky? Did he plan the finale or did he stumble through it? The show refuses to give you both at once. There's also a lovely small thing about how the name enters the world. Walt says it once, in a room, to a man who is about to be extremely violent, and then it escapes him entirely. Within a season, it's a brand. Within 5 seasons, it's Heisenberg graffiti on his house. By the end, there's a sketch of him on the news that looks nothing like him, and everyone recognizes it. He invented a person, and then that person got away from him and became more real than he was. The DEA hunts Heisenberg. Hank has dinner with Walt. Same man, and it takes 4 years and a book in a bathroom for anyone to put them together. Right? Onwards. A used car lot. Season 2. Jesse's got a bit of money and he's shopping, and before he settles on that miserable little Toyota Tercel, he asks about something else on the forecourt. A Chevy El Camino. Theory number 21, and it's confirmed by the simple fact that it's on screen. The car Jesse escapes in the final seconds of the entire series is the car he wanted in Season 2 and couldn't have. The film is named after it. 2 years of story between the wanting and the getting, and in between he loses absolutely everything. I don't know whether that was planned in 2009 or found later by writers going back through old episodes looking for something to use. Honestly, I hope it was found later. There's something nicer about a show that goes rummaging through its own past for meaning. Theory number 22. Everything Jesse becomes is established in one scene in Season 1, in an episode called Cancer Man. His parents find a joint in the house. They assume it's his because of course they do, and they throw him out. It wasn't his, it was his little brother's, and Jesse takes the fall without a moment's hesitation. And then on his way out, he grinds the thing under his heel where the kid can see to put him off. That's the character. Protects the younger person, absorbs the punishment, hates the drug he's about to build a life on. Every single thing Jesse does afterwards runs on that engine. Tomas, Brock, Andrea, Drew Sharp. He blows up his entire situation over kids again and again, and the show told you why in season 1. Theory number 23 is the obvious one, so let me try to say something slightly less obvious about it. Yes, Walt is a substitute father and Jesse is a substitute son. But the detail people skip is that Jesse's actual parents are alive, present, financially comfortable, and not remotely cruel. They're just done with him. They're tired, and they've decided he's a problem rather than a person, which makes it worse, I think, than if they'd been monsters. Jesse doesn't get abused into Walt's orbit. He gets politely filed away, and then a man turns up who acts interested in him, and that's all it takes. Theory number 24 is a small one, and I like it because it's Gilligan grassing himself up. Asked whether he had any regrets about the show, he said yes. 1. Jesse's teeth were too good. The lad takes an extraordinary number of beatings and uses a drug that famously destroys your mouth. And he keeps a full set of Hollywood dentistry throughout. Fans, being fans, turn that into a theory. If Jesse's teeth are fine, maybe Jesse's use was always lighter than the show implied, and he's more functional than anyone gives him credit for. It's not a serious argument, but it's a nice example of a fan base taking a production apology and converting it into lore. Theory number 25. Peekaboo opens with Jesse watching a beetle before Skinny Pete stomps on it. It's nothing. It's 4 seconds of a bloke idly crushing an insect while he's waiting around. And then that same episode ends with a man's head under a cash machine, and Jesse standing in a room he can't leave, and a little boy watching cartoons through it all. Same gesture scaled up. The show does this constantly, planting a small cruelty at the top of an episode and cashing it at the bottom, and it almost never draws attention to it. Theory number 26 is the most upsetting piece of foreshadowing in the series, and there are 3 separate parts to it. First, in an episode called Over, Jesse tries to bring Jane breakfast in bed and she catches him in the kitchen. He says, "You weren't supposed to wake up." And she says, "Ever? It's a joke." They both laugh. Second, Jane tells Jesse to lie on his side after using because you can choke otherwise. She says it as a kindness. Third, Walt separately turns baby Holly onto her side in her cot for exactly that reason. He knows the rule. He knows it well enough to do it automatically for an infant. And then he stands in a bedroom and watches Jane die of the one thing he knows how to prevent, and does nothing. The show taught him the fix twice before it gave him the choice. Theory number 27 is a detail in the background of Jane's own flat. She painted murals on her walls, and one of them in the corner is a teddy bear falling out of the sky. She painted it before the plane crash. The bear that lands in Walt's pool with half its face burned off, the one that becomes the show's most recognizable object, is on Jane's wall while she's still alive. Nightmare fuel, honestly. And nobody points at it. Theory number 28. Jesse's real ending is described in season 3 in a rehab meeting, and it isn't Alaska. He tells a story about a woodwork class and a box he made. He kept rebuilding it, better each time, tighter joins, better wood, until he'd made something genuinely beautiful. And then he traded it for an ounce of weed. That's Jesse, capable of making something good and then selling it for nothing because he doesn't believe he's allowed to keep it. The theory is that this speech is the whole arc, and that Alaska is him finally not trading the box. I'm inclined to agree, and it's the one bit of the ending I find genuinely comforting. Theory number 29. Jesse calls Todd Ricky Hitler in a fit of temper, purely as an insult after Todd's uncle has already been introduced. And then there's the Vamonos Pest logo. The company Todd works for has a cartoon running insect as its mascot. And if you look at how the legs are arranged, you'll notice a shape you can't unsee afterwards. Whether that was deliberate is genuinely unclear to me. It might just be an unfortunate bit of graphic design that fans have retrofitted. But it sat there on the side of a van for a whole season while a member of a neo-Nazi gang drives it around, and I struggle to believe nobody in the art department noticed. Theory number 30, and I'll end this lot on something gentler. Jesse is the only character in Breaking Bad who makes things. He draws, constantly. Doodles, sketches, the robot he designs in his head. He builds the box. He's the one who names the product, who cares what the lab looks like, who wants the process to be good rather than just profitable. Walt is a chemist who talks endlessly about art and produces only product. Jesse is a dealer who produces art and doesn't notice. The theory goes that the show is quietly arguing about who the actual craftsman is, and that it's not the man with the doctorate. I want to sit with Jesse for another minute because he plays completely differently on a rewatch, and I don't think that's talked about enough. Watching weekly in real time, Jesse reads as the screw-up. He's the liability. Every time the plot goes wrong, it's because Jesse got emotional, or Jesse got high, or Jesse couldn't leave something alone. You spend a lot of the early seasons slightly exasperated with him, and the show absolutely lets you feel that way. Then you watch it again knowing where it ends, and he becomes almost unbearable to look at. Because on the second pass, everything that reads as failure reads as conscience. He can't leave the boy in the drug house. He can't get past Tomas. He can't accept Drew Sharp. Every plot problem he causes is him refusing to do the thing the story needs him to do in order to be tidy. And Walt, meanwhile, is efficient. Walt solves problems. Walt is never the reason a plan collapses, because Walt will do the necessary thing without blinking. On first watch, that reads as competence. On second watch, it reads as the actual horror. There's a version of the show where Jesse is the protagonist and Walt is the thing that happens to him. Same footage, same scenes, completely different film, and I think the writers knew that because of how carefully they keep Jesse from ever quite getting away. The other thing I notice on rewatch is how young he is. He's a kid. He's a kid the entire time, right up to the end. And everyone in the show treats him as disposable except for one ex-cop from Philadelphia who rarely says a kind word to him but would have died for him anyway. Anyway, that's Jesse. Let's talk about the most controlled man in Albuquerque and the enormous hole where his past should be. Here's the thing about Gustavo Fring that took me an embarrassingly long time to notice. The most interesting fact about him is an absence. There are no records. Hank goes looking, and there's a Chilean national who entered Mexico in the mid-'80s and effectively begins existing at that point. Before that, nothing. Not a school, not a job, not a family. Theory number 31. Gus was part of the Pinochet regime. The evidence is mostly in one word. Hector, taunting him in a flashback, calls him Big Generalissimo. That's a military title, delivered as a sneer at a man who has never been shown holding a rank. Gus's own explanation for the missing paperwork is that the government destroyed a great deal of it, which is true of Chile under Pinochet and is also a spectacularly convenient thing to be able to say about yourself. And then there's how he kills. Gus doesn't fight. He cuts a man's throat in front of two witnesses to make a point and then changes his shirt. He poisons a room full of people and calculates his own dose in advance. That's not gangster violence. That's administrative violence. It's the work of somebody who learned it somewhere with a chain of command. Theory number 32 builds straight on it and answers a question the show leaves hanging. Why did Don Eladio spare him? Eladio has Max shot in front of Gus in a garden over a business proposal. Then he lets Gus live and lets him keep operating for 20 years while clearly loathing him. That's completely out of character for a man who kills people for insufficient deference. The theory is that Gus had American protection. Some versions say the CIA outright, and the historical hook is genuinely interesting. In 1985, the DEA agent Kiki Camarena was kidnapped and killed in Mexico. and the response from the American side was so severe that it established in practice that people connected to the US government were not to be touched. Gus arrives the following year. Eladio kills the civilian and spares the one with a phone number. It's never confirmed, but it explains a 20-year stalemate that otherwise makes no sense at all. Theory number 33. Max wasn't only a business partner. Breaking Bad never says it. It doesn't have to. Gus spends 2 decades and an enormous fortune constructing a revenge so elaborate it eventually kills him over one man he knew for a few years and who never appears alive for more than a couple of minutes of screen time. You don't do that over a colleague. The later material effectively settles it, but the show on its own already did, and the way it did is what I find remarkable. It's all in Giancarlo Esposito's face during the pool scene. The rest of it is inference. Theory number 34, and this one's small and mean. Gus's family doesn't exist. He mentions them once, over dinner at his house, cooking for Walt. He says he has children, that his wife is away. It's a warm, humanizing detail dropped at exactly the moment he needs Walt to relax. They're never seen, never mentioned again. After his death, nobody grieves him, no family comes forward. The whole life he described evaporates. The theory, and I think it's plainly correct, is that Gus invented a family in real time because a family is a thing that makes a man legible. And he needed Walt to think he could read him. Theory number 35. The teddy bear predicted his face. The bear that lands in Walt's pool after the plane crash is missing an eye and burned down one side. 2 seasons later, Gus walks out of a nursing home room with one side of his head gone and one eye staring, adjusts his tie, and falls over dead. Now, was that planned in season 2? Almost certainly not, and the writers have been fairly open about how much of this show was worked out as they went. But somebody in season 4 looked at that bear and built the most famous death in television around it. And the fact that it lines up perfectly is either enormous luck or someone quietly doing their homework. Theory number 36 is a case of a character handing another character a murder weapon by accident. In season 4, Walt is furious that Jesse didn't poison Gus when he had dinner at his house. Jesse snaps back that there was one pot of stew on the table. What was he supposed to do? Poison himself as well? 1 episode later, Gus flies to Mexico, brings a bottle of very expensive tequila to Don Eladio, pours it for everyone, drinks it himself first to prove it's safe, and then goes to the bathroom and throws it back up. He'd taken something beforehand. He poisoned himself on purpose because it was the only way to poison the room. Jesse said the thing was impossible. Gus does it in the next episode. I love that the show never draws a line between the two. Theory number 37. Hector was never as helpless as he looked. For 4 seasons, Hector Salamanca is a man in a chair with a bell. He can't speak, can't move, can't do anything but glare, and Gus visits him specifically to gloat, because Gus wants him to know exactly how much he's losing. The theory is that Hector was managing that the refusal to look at Gus, the apparent total defeat, was a performance designed to make Gus comfortable enough to keep coming back into the room. He needed Gus in the room. That's the only place a bomb is useful. And when Walt turns up with a proposal, Hector doesn't hesitate for even a second. Not one moment of consideration for a man who'd been catatonic with rage for years. He'd been waiting. Theory number 38, and this is a reading rather than a theory. But it's the one that makes Gus make sense to me. The Super Lab is a mausoleum. Think about what it actually is. An enormous, immaculate, climate-controlled chamber built at ruinous expense underneath a laundry, dedicated entirely to producing the product that Max was pitching in the garden on the day he was shot. Gus built the business Max died proposing, perfected it, and then never enjoyed any of it. He doesn't spend the money, he lives in a plain house and eats alone and drives a Volvo. That's not an empire. That's a grieving man doing the same thing over and over in a very tidy room. Theory number 39. Madrigal was hiding in plain sight from season 3. The German conglomerate that turns out to own everything, that employs Lydia, that owns the industrial laundry with the lab under it, first appears in the fine print of a Los Pollos Hermanos television advert. Just a logo and a line of small text at the bottom of a fried chicken commercial. At the time, it means nothing. It's set dressing. 2 seasons later, it's the reason the whole distribution network exists. Fun detail, the show hid its biggest corporate reveal in the part of an advert that legally has to be there and that nobody has ever read. Theory number 40. I'll flag as pure fan interpretation because I don't want to present it as intent. Fans have built quite a lot on Esposito's stillness. The argument is that Gus barely blinks, rarely sits, and holds himself with a rigidity that reads as somebody who learned very early that being watched is dangerous. Some people go further and call it a trauma response, evidence for the chilly material we've already covered. I think it's mostly an actor making an extremely good choice about how to be frightening while wearing a manager's shirt, but it does mean that the single most terrifying man in the series never once raises his voice, and that's worth noticing. Right? Let's leave the professionals and go and sit in a kitchen in a suburb, because some of the most disturbing material in this show happens at a family dinner. He has good genes. That's Ted Beneke looking at a photograph of Walt Jr. that Skylar's just shown him. It's a compliment. It's also, according to theory number 41, a man acknowledging something. The theory is that Walt Jr. is Ted's son. The supporting material is thin but persistent. The fact that Skylar left Beneke Fabricators years earlier under circumstances nobody explains properly. The flirtation that's clearly bidirectional, and that barely excruciating Marilyn Monroe birthday song she performs for him in The Office. I don't buy it, for the simple reason that 5 seasons is a long time to sit on a bomb like that. But I understand the impulse because Walt Jr. is the only person in this show without a secret, and some part of the audience refused to accept that. Theory number 42 isn't really a theory anymore, it's a correction. Skylar was right about everything, and the audience's hatred of her is the most successful thing the show ever engineered. At the time, the online reaction to her was genuinely vicious. There were whole hate groups, and her actual crimes amount to not wanting a drug lab attached to her children, correctly identifying her husband as a liar within about a season and a half, and then, once trapped, becoming a competent money launderer in order to keep everyone alive. The theory goes that this was deliberate, that the show put you inside Walt's point of view so thoroughly that anyone obstructing him would read as an antagonist and then waited to see if you'd notice what that said about you. It's not a comfortable reading. It is, I think, the correct one. Theory number 43. Marie's purple is a compulsion, not a preference. She's in it constantly. Her house, her clothes, her car, everything. The show uses yellow as an occasional relief valve, but otherwise she's drowning in one color, and the theory reads it as a woman managing an anxiety she can't name by controlling every visible surface, which sits very neatly beside the shoplifting. Marie steals things she doesn't need and can afford, tells elaborate lies about being a nurse or a horse rider or whatever else occurs to her, and then goes home to a purple room. She's the same illness as her brother-in-law in a much smaller container, and she's the only one in the family who ends up more or less intact. Theory number 44. Hank gives an anti-drug lecture that's secretly a description of Hank's own house. He takes Walt Jr. to a police support meeting to frighten him off marijuana, and the whole speech is proper after-school special stuff. Gateway substances. It starts small, and then it takes your life. Now apply that word for word to Walt. It started with one cook to pay for treatment. Small, contained, justified. And then it was Crazy 8. And then it was Jane. And then it was a plane. And then it was $80 million in a storage unit and a brother-in-law dead in a hole in the desert. Gateway crimes. Hank was describing the mechanism while sitting 6 feet from the man it was happening to. Theory number 45 is a piece of visual rhyming that I find genuinely hard to watch now. In 1 minute, Hank ends up in a car park, badly injured on the ground, having just survived the cousins. It's the moment the show establishes that he's tougher than he looks. In Ozymandias, Hank is in the desert, badly injured, on the ground, and the staging is almost identical. Same posture, same framing, same helplessness. The show is deliberately reminding you that he survived this exact shot before, and then he doesn't. Theory number 46 is a warning delivered directly to the man it's about. After Gus is exposed, the head of the local DEA sits with Hank and talks about how he had that man in his home. Ate dinner with him, never once suspected. He's ruined by it, and he is fired. Hank listens to this. And then he spends the next season discovering that his brother-in-law, the one he's had 100 barbecues with, the one whose garage he stood in, is the man he's been chasing. Same situation, worse relationship, and Hank knows exactly what it will cost his career because he watched it happen to somebody else. He goes anyway. Say what you like about Hank, and he's got flaws, but that's the one moment where somebody in this show does the right thing knowing the price. Theory number 47. Marie tells you she's going to take Holly. Twice while babysitting, in season 5, she jokes about loving the baby so much she never wants to give her back. Both times it plays as a doting aunt being soppy. And then the truth comes out, and Marie genuinely tries to take Holly on the grounds that the child shouldn't be in that house, which in turn foreshadows Walt actually doing it, driving off with his own daughter while his son calls the police, before he loses his nerve at a fire station. 3 separate people try to remove that baby from that family over about 4 episodes. She's the only one everybody agrees on. Theory number 48 is a rug, and it's the funniest bit of foreshadowing in the show. Ted trips slightly on a rug in his hallway before answering the door. Small character beat, man who irons his socks. Later, Hayul and Kubi turn up to make him sign a check, and Ted panics and runs and trips over that rug and goes head first into a cabinet and never walks properly again. The show built a Chekhov's rug. I don't know what else to tell you. Theory number 49. In the season 2 premiere, Skylar is looking through old photographs of herself and Ted, fondly, while her marriage is going wrong. Ted isn't in the show yet. He doesn't turn up for another 6 episodes. He is a recurring character, not just a face in a picture, and the writers had already positioned him as the exit route. Theory number 50. Holly's first word. She says mama repeatedly, insistently in the bathroom in front of Walt. And Walt tries to get her to say his name and she won't, and he laughs it off and the show moves on. Then in Ozymandias he takes her, and in the public bathroom she keeps asking for her mother over and over until he drives her to a fire station and leaves her in the cab of a fire engine. An infant with a 15-word vocabulary is the only character who successfully tells Walter White no. It's the sort of thing that would be unbearably cute in another program. Here it functions as a verdict. Right, quick one, and I'll keep it short because I know what you're here for. If you're enjoying this and you haven't hit subscribe, it does genuinely help. Most of the work on these isn't writing, it's discarding. You find a brilliant detail, you go looking for where it came from, and it turns out to be something a bloke asserted confidently on a forum in 2013 that nobody has checked since. About a third of what I dig up ends up in the bin for exactly that reason, and I'd rather bin it than tell you something that isn't true. So if you're having a nice time, that's the ask. That's all of it. Back to it. Now, let's talk about the crew, because some of the best material in this show has nothing to do with the plot at all. There's a strand running through the family material that I want to pick at for a minute, and it's about the money because I think the show does something with it that people skip past. Walt spends some of it. That's the thing. He acquires an amount of cash so large that it stops being countable and becomes a volume, a physical quantity measured in barrels and pallets. And his life does not change. He drives a Pontiac Aztek for years. He lives in the same house with the same furniture. He buys one car for his son and one for himself in a fit of pride and gets bullied into returning them. He has, at peak, somewhere north of $80 million worth of currency in a hole in the desert, and he's still complaining about the water heater, which tells you the money was never the point, obviously, and the show knows. You know that. But the specific way it demonstrates it is what I find clever. It doesn't have a character explain it. It just shows you a man with an unspendable fortune worrying about a domestic appliance and lets you sit with the arithmetic. The storage unit scene is the peak of it. Skylar takes him in there. She can't tell him how much is in the pile because she stopped being able to count it. She just says she wants him to stop and asks how much is enough. And there's no answer because the question doesn't apply to whatever he's actually doing. And then there's the ending where the money finally moves. It has to be laundered through two people he despises, disguised as charity, delivered to a boy who would refuse it if he knew where it came from. Walt's entire project succeeds on a technicality, and only by being disguised as the exact thing he refused at the start. There's a fan reading, and I'm sympathetic to it, that the money in Breaking Bad functions the way the ring does in certain fantasy stories. It's not really wealth, it's a score. It's a number that proves the thing he needs proving, which is that he was always the cleverest person in the room and everyone else was wrong about him. The barrel in the desert is the perfect object for that. He drags it across the sand until he physically cannot drag it any further, and then he sits on it and the show holds on the shot for a long time. A man alone in an empty landscape sitting on a container full of proof that nobody will ever see. I said earlier that this show is about consequence and delay. It's also about the difference between having something and being able to use it, and Walt never once closes that gap. Anyway, enough of the house, let's go behind the camera. Theory number 51, and this one's confirmed, and it's the sort of detail that makes me want to lie down. 62. That's the episode count, and I mentioned it right at the top. It isn't a coincidence of scheduling. Element 62 on the periodic table is samarium. Samarium is used in treatments for a range of cancers, including lung cancer. The show about a man dying of lung cancer, which opens and closes with chemistry, ran for exactly the number of episodes that corresponds to the element used to treat him. I've seen people argue it's post hoc that the count fell out of network negotiations. Maybe. But somebody noticed, and nobody in the production has ever seemed keen to deny it. Theory number 52. The logo is hiding in the set design. The title card is two green squares set vertically, containing the periodic symbols for bromine and barium. Br and Ba. Once you know what the arrangement looks like, you start finding it everywhere in the production design. Floor tiles, wall panels. There's a hospital corridor where the flooring pattern is unmistakably it. I genuinely cannot tell you how many of these are intentional and how many are the human brain doing what the human brain does with squares. But there are enough of them in enough deliberate compositions that at least some of the art department were clearly having a laugh. Theory number 53 answers a physics question that bothered people for years. Why is the pizza not sliced? Walt throws a whole pizza onto the roof in a single furious motion and it lands intact, which it could only do if it were uncut. Gilligan explained this in a Reddit AMA. They discussed it at length before shooting because a sliced pizza would come apart in the air and they wanted the throw in one piece. But then you got a plot hole because most pizza places don't sell them uncut. So the writers went back and wrote a scene where Badger turns up at Jesse's with a stack of unsliced pizzas and explains that this particular place doesn't cut them and passes the savings on to you. They rewrote a different episode to justify a prop. That's the level of obsessive we're dealing with. Theory number 54 is the sad sequel to that. The house is real and people wouldn't stop. The exterior is an actual family home in Albuquerque, and for years fans have turned up and thrown pizzas onto the roof of a house belonging to two people who did nothing wrong. The owners eventually put up a 6-foot iron fence and security cameras. Gilligan has begged people to stop more than once, and he was properly annoyed about it. He said there was nothing original or funny or cool about it, that it had been done, that you are not the first. And then, more pointedly, that he loves the fans, but he doesn't consider those people fans. Cranston apparently landed the throw on the first take, incidentally, which somehow makes the whole thing more irritating. One take. And a decade of pizzas. Theory number 55. Gail's karaoke video is the funniest object in the series, and it arrives inside a murder investigation. Hank, going through the belongings of a dead man he believes to be Heisenberg's partner, finds a home video of Gail Bedecker performing a full, sincere, deeply committed rendition of Major Tom in his flat. Dancing, smiling at the camera, absolutely no irony anywhere in it. And you're laughing, and then you remember you're watching evidence collected from a man who was shot in the face by someone you like, and the laughing gets complicated. This show did that constantly, and I don't think it ever gets enough credit for how hard it is to do. Theory number 56. Cradock Marine Bank is an X-Files reference. The bank that turns up in the money laundering side of the story is the same institution Fox Mulder banked with. Gilligan wrote for the X-Files for years before this, and a decent chunk of his crew came with him. It's the kind of thing that means nothing to the plot and everything to the person who put it there. A quiet nod back at the job that made the career. I've got a soft spot for that sort of Easter egg, actually. Not the clever ones, the sentimental ones. Theory number 57. There's a chess game in Ozymandias. In the background of one sequence, 2 firefighters are playing. The camera doesn't emphasize it, and the match never resolves. But if you pause it, the White King is cornered. Down to almost nothing, no escape squares, a move or two from finished. Ozymandias is the episode where Walt loses everything in about 48 minutes. And the show put the score of that game in the background where you'd never look. I find that slightly maddening, if I'm honest. There's a version of me that wishes they'd made it a bit more visible, just so somebody got to feel clever in real time. Theory number 58. There's a painting on Jesse's wall in season 5 with the show's title hidden in the brushwork. It's an abstract piece, and if you look at it long enough, the words are apparently there in the composition. I'll be honest, this one lives right on the boundary between Easter egg and people seeing faces in clouds. But it's been circulating for years, and it's the sort of thing this art department would absolutely do. Theory number 59, and this is confirmed and quite important. The recipe is wrong on purpose. The production consulted the DEA. They also worked with a chemistry professor, Donna Nelson, who advised on the science so that Walt would sound like a real chemist. And she has confirmed that steps were deliberately removed and altered so that nothing on screen constitutes instructions. Which means every time Walt explains something in that lab, and it sounds authoritative and specific, it's authoritative and specific and quietly broken. They wanted it to feel real to chemists and be useless to everyone else, and they managed both. Theory number 60. The camera keeps going inside things. This isn't a theory so much as the show's signature, and I think it deserves a mention. Breaking Bad films from inside places nobody films from. Inside a shovel, inside a barrel as it's being filled, under the floor of a car, inside a machine, looking out at people. The effect is that the objects have a point of view. The stuff in this show watches the people. And in a series where a teddy bear and a rug and a pizza all outlive their moment, that starts to feel less like a stylistic tick and more like an argument. I want to spend another minute here, because the more you dig into how this thing was made, the more it starts to seem faintly unreasonable. Take the color work, which we'll properly get into shortly. Gilligan has talked about sitting down with the costume department specifically to plan palettes, and one of the designers, Kathleen DeToro, called it her ugly show, which I think is wonderful. Nothing anybody wears in Breaking Bad is attractive. It's all mid-range department store clothing on people in their 40s in a hot climate. And underneath that deliberate drabness, there's a color system running the entire time. That's the trick, really. The show hides its craft inside things that look cheap. The set dressing looks like nobody thought about it. The compositions look casual. And then you pause a frame and there's a chess game finishing in the corner. There's also the sheer amount of retrofitting. This show was not planned out in advance, whatever anyone tells you. Jesse was originally going to die at the end of season 1, and they changed their minds because the performance was too good. Gus was invented to replace Tuco when the actor had other commitments. Enormous structural pillars of this series exist because of scheduling, which makes the internal consistency more impressive, not less. Nobody sat down in 2007 with a 5-year plan. What happened instead is that a room full of people kept going back through their own old episodes, looking for things they'd left lying around and using them. That's not prophecy, that's just very good housekeeping. And it's why so many of the theories in this video are unfalsifiable in an interesting way. When a show operates like that, you genuinely cannot tell the difference between a thing that was planted and a thing that was found, which means the fans doing the finding are, in a small sense, doing the same job the writers were. Anyway, speaking of color, Albuquerque in this show is a sort of washed out biscuit color. Sand, stucco, hot white sky, everything is faded, and that's the point, because against a background that flat, any actual color becomes a signal. Theory number 61, and this is confirmed rather than theorized. The color system is real, it's deliberate, and it runs the whole way through. Gilligan has talked about it directly, including in an interview with Vogue, describing planning sessions with the costume designer about which character wears what and when. The rules aren't rigid, and people who claim to have decoded every frame are overreaching. But the framework holds. Characters have assigned palettes, those palettes shift as the characters do, and the shifts are timed to story beats rather than to what was clean that week. That's the mechanism. I'll not explain it again because it applies to everything that follows. Theory number 62. Walt goes beige to black, and you can date his decline by it. Season 1, he's in stone, khaki, pale green, the color of a man trying not to be looked at. By season 5, he's in black, head to foot with the hat. The transition isn't sudden. It creeps through grays and dark greens over about 4 years of story time. And if you flick through stills from each season in order, it's almost embarrassing how legible it is. The nice detail is that the beige never fully goes away. He puts it back on when he's performing harmlessness. It becomes a costume within a costume. Theory number 63. Everyone else gets a color too. Skylar is in blue almost constantly, which reads as loyalty and also as cold, depending on the scene. Marie's purple we've covered. Jesse is yellow and red, the two loudest colors available, which is exactly right for him. Gus is usually in yellow when he's being the chicken man, and often in gray when he isn't. And then there's Walt Jr., who spends most of the show in plaid, which is interesting because plaid is other people's colors woven together. The kid is made of everyone else, and he doesn't have one of his own until the very end. Theory number 64. Look at the title card again sometime. 2 squares, and they're green. Not a neutral choice, because green in this show clusters around money and around the thing Walt can't stop chewing on, which is the company he walked away from. It's in the background of his life constantly once you start looking for it. And there's a lovely bit of color maths here too, in that green is what you get when you mix Skylar's blue with Jesse's yellow, which puts Walt right in the middle of the 2 people he's ruining. I don't know if that last part was intentional. I choose to believe it was. Theory number 65. Pink means a child is about to pay for something. Holly is usually in pink. And pink shows up at exactly the wrong moments elsewhere. Walt is wearing a light green shirt when he stands in his garden and watches 2 planes hit each other over his house. Saul turns up in a vivid pink shirt when the Empire starts genuinely coming apart. It's the only color in the show that reads as innocent, and it's used almost exclusively to mark damage. Theory number 66 is about the object all of that points at, the bear. It falls out of the sky into the swimming pool, one eye gone, half of it scorched, and it becomes the most recognizable thing in the series. We've talked about what it predicts. What I want to say here is what it is. It's a child's toy that fell out of a passenger plane that crashed because an air traffic controller couldn't concentrate because his daughter died because Walt stood in a bedroom and watched. It's the physical receipt for a decision made 3 episodes earlier by a man who wasn't even in the same city. That's the thesis of the whole program in one prop, floating in a swimming pool in a garden in a suburb. Theory number 67. Oranges mean somebody's for it. This one's inherited. The Godfather uses oranges as a death signal so consistently that it's basically a film school lesson, and crime drama has been nicking it ever since. Breaking Bad does it repeatedly. An orange rolls onto the floor just before Ted's spine goes. Walt's neighbor drops her shopping when she sees him, and the oranges scatter across the drive. There's a mural on Jane's bedroom wall. Is it always meaningful? No, sometimes an orange is lunch. But the pattern's dense enough that once you're watching for it, the fruit bowl becomes genuinely stressful. Theory number 68. The ricin takes 4 seasons to go off and lands in a cup of tea. Walt makes it to kill Gus and doesn't use it. It goes in a cigarette. It gets stolen, recovered, hidden behind a plug socket, used to poison a child in a way that turns out to be a different poison entirely, and then sits in an abandoned house for the better part of a year. And its actual target in the end is Lydia, who takes stevia in her chamomile tea and who Walt has watched order it precisely the same way in the same booth every single time they've met. He didn't need to trick her, he just needed to have been paying attention for a few months. That's the most Walt murder in the series, and he isn't even in the room. Theory number 69 is a license plate gag that took the internet years to spot. Saul's car has a vanity plate reading LWY Rupp, lawyer up. In one scene near the end of the show, Walt is standing in front of the car in exactly the position that hides the first letter, which leaves Wyrup, wire up. And Jesse does shortly afterwards in the attempt to bring Walt down. That's a 2-word joke that requires an actor to hit a specific mark and a camera to hold a specific angle for a payoff that maybe 1 viewer in 1,000 catches live. Absolutely no notes. Theory number 70. The watch. Jesse buys Walt a watch for his birthday. It's a genuine gesture made at a point where their relationship is about as warm as it ever gets, and it comes not long after Walt has seriously considered having him killed. Walt wears it through everything, the Empire, the collapse, the flight, and then he's in New Hampshire at a payphone, having just heard his son tell him to die, and he takes it off and leaves it on top of the phone box. Nobody says anything about it. There's no line. He just takes off the last object anybody gave him out of affection and abandons it on top of the payphone at a gas station, and the camera moves on. Now, let's talk about how much of this show was pointing at itself the whole time. I want to talk about sound for a minute because it's the part of this show that almost nobody theorizes about, and it's doing an enormous amount of work. Breaking Bad is quiet, properly quiet in a way that television usually isn't. There are long stretches with no score at all, just air conditioning and traffic, and the specific dry hum of a hot afternoon in a town with not much going on. Dave Porter's music, when it does turn up, is mostly texture rather than melody. Low strings, rattles, something that sounds like a machine 2 rooms away. The effect is that when the show does use a proper song, it lands like a brick. The needle drops in this series are among the most memorable on television precisely because there are so few of them, and because the show has spent 40 minutes teaching you to listen to nothing. There's a related thing about the cooking sequences that I only clocked on about my 3rd watch. The montages, the ones with the bouncy Mexican brass and the fast cutting and the crystals forming, are the only moments in the entire program that feel fun. And they're deliberately shot to feel fun. Bright, rhythmic, satisfying, the visual grammar of an advert, which is a genuinely nasty trick to play. When you think about what's actually being depicted, the show makes you enjoy the work the same way Walt enjoys the work, and it does it with editing and brass instruments. And then it cuts to a woman on the floor of a flat with vomit in her hair. The other sound detail worth mentioning is the silences after violence. Breaking Bad almost never scores its deaths. Gus dies in near silence. Mike dies to a river. Hank dies with wind. The show consistently declines to tell you how to feel at exactly the moments most television would be laying it on thick, and I think that restraint is a lot of why those scenes have stayed in people's heads for over a decade. There's a small fan theory attached to all this that I quite like and can't verify at all, which is that the increasing quietness of the later seasons is meant to reflect Walt's isolation. The argument is that as he loses people, the soundscape empties out until by New Hampshire there's essentially nothing left but a fire in a stove and a man breathing. I suspect that's just what happens when you strip a story down to one character in a cabin. But it's a nice thought, and it's the sort of thing that only occurs to you when you're watching something for the fourth time with the lights off, which I suspect is roughly where a fair few of you are right now. One more. The show is full of ambient dread that comes from machinery. Fans, generators, dryers, the extractor in the lab, the industrial laundry above the super lab pounding away constantly. There's almost always something mechanical running in the background of a Breaking Bad scene, and it gives the whole thing a low-level sense of a process that can't be stopped, which, given everything we've been talking about, is about as on the nose as this show ever gets. And it's in the sound mix where nobody looks. Theory number 71. Season 2 tells you what's going to happen in the episode titles, and it does it in order. There are 4 episodes across that season called 737, Down, Over, and ABQ. Read them one after the other. 737, Down, Over, Albuquerque. A 737 comes down over Albuquerque in the finale. I remember finding that out years after the fact and feeling genuinely got. Not tricked, got. There's a difference. And the cold opens of those same episodes show you the aftermath in fragments in black and white, a bit more each time, so that you spend an entire season looking at a crime scene you can't identify. The show told you the ending 4 separate times and nobody worked it out until it was over. Theory number 72. And this is the one that made me put my tea down. Badger's Star Trek script is a map of the endgame. In Season 5, Badger pitches an imaginary Star Trek episode to Skinny Pete. There's a pie-eating contest on the Enterprise, and it comes down to 3, Kirk, Spock, and Chekhov. Kirk drops out first. Chekhov has Scotty helping him, but Scotty gets distracted by Uhura and accidentally kills him. Spock wins. Now line it up. Kirk is Hank, out first. Chekhov is Jack, being assisted by Scotty, who is Todd. Todd gets distracted by Uhura, who is Lydia. And that distraction is precisely what gets Jack killed. Because if Todd hadn't been keeping Jesse alive to please Lydia, Walt would never have come back for any of them. Spock is Walt. Spock wins. 2 stone lads in a lounge lay out the entire final act in a conversation the show frames as pure comic relief. It's either an astonishing coincidence or the single best hidden thing in the series, and I go back and forth on which I'd prefer. Theory number 73. Walt explains how to kill Gus 2 seasons before he does it. He and Jesse are making thermite to burn through a padlock, and Walt, being Walt, delivers a small lecture about how thermite was used in the Second World War to disable an enormous German railway gun. The gun was called Gustav. Walt subsequently blows up a man named Gustavo, who is in business with a German conglomerate. The show handed him the metaphor and then let him live inside it. Theory number 74 is a joke that turns into a child's death. Saul is pitching money laundering options in Season 3 and suggests a laser tag arcade. He runs through the benefits and finishes with, "Plus, you get to shoot at kids." It's a throwaway. It's Saul being Saul. 2 seasons later, Todd shoots a 14-year-old boy off a dirt bike in the desert because the boy saw them. Theory number 75. Skylar writes Todd's line for him. Early in season 5, she tells Walt she will not raise children in a house where somebody being killed gets waved away with shit happens. She's drawing a line, and it's one of her best scenes. A few episodes later, Todd climbs down off a train having just shot a kid and says exactly that. Shit happens. Same 2 words. The show gave the phrase to the person Skylar was describing. Theory number 76. The ending was on screen long before it arrived. Season 5 opens with a flash forward. Walt in a diner, bearded, 52 candles arranged in bacon, a New Hampshire driving license in another name, and a machine gun in the boot of a car. Then the season goes back and gets on with the story. The show did this repeatedly, and every time it was the ending sitting in plain view. You knew he'd end up alone in a car park with a heavy weapon. You just didn't know who it was for. And the whole back half of the series is you slowly finding out. Theory number 77. Gus tells Walt the show's thesis over dinner, and Walt hears the wrong half. On the tour of the Super Lab, Gus tells Walt that a man provides even when he's not appreciated. He's manipulating Walt at the time, obviously. He's saying it to get him back in the lab. And Walt does provide, technically. A portion of that money reaches his family in the end. He also has to threaten 2 former friends into laundering it because his son won't take a cent from him. And his wife is terrified of him, and his brother-in-law is dead in the desert, and Walt is dying on a floor. He provided. He was not appreciated. Gus was right in the most useless possible way. Theory number 78. Mike describes a hypothetical death to the woman who arranges it. He's in Lydia's house to kill her, and she begs him not to shoot her in the face because she doesn't want her daughter to see her like that. And Mike tells her nobody will ever find her body at all, which frightens her far more, because now her daughter will think she was abandoned. Some episodes later, Mike is shot by the river, and his body goes into a barrel, and nobody ever finds him. His granddaughter, who he adored, is left with a man who simply stopped turning up. That's the one that gets me, out of all of them. Not the death, the granddaughter. Theory number 79. Hank asks for the wrong thing and gets exactly it. He tells Walt he wishes he'd been there to put the cuffs on Heisenberg, and compares himself to Popeye Doyle from the French Connection. Walt mildly points out that Doyle never actually catches Frog 1. In the desert, Hank does get the cuffs on. He gets the arrest. He gets the phone call to Marie. He says out loud that he's got him. And then he never brings him in because he's shot in the head 8 minutes later. Be careful what you ask for is a fairly worn idea. This is the most brutal version of it I've seen on television. Theory number 80. A logistics problem in Season 5 is set up by an offhand line in Season 5. Mike's lawyer is astonished that he intends to visit 9 men across 3 prisons in a single day. It's a scheduling complaint. It exists to show you how much running around Mike does. And then it becomes the shape of one of the show's most notorious sequences, because Walt needs those same 9 men dead, and they have to die within 2 minutes of each other, or the survivors will start talking. Same 9 men, same impossible-sounding constraint, turned inside out. I want to come back to Gus for a bit, because the Hector material rewards more time than a single entry gives it, and because this is a good place to slow down. The thing about the bell is that it's the only power Hector has, and both men know it. He rings it for yes. He rings it for a beat somebody's asking him to keep. He rings it in a DEA interview room to spell out an insult. It's a fully functional communication device that everyone treats as a novelty, and that includes the audience. Gus does not underestimate Hector. Gus overestimates his own understanding of what winning looks like. He believes the punishment he's designed, which is keeping a man alive in a chair and visiting to remind him of it, is complete. He believes it's finished? That's the mistake. And it's the same mistake we've talked about with the lab. Gus builds enormous, immaculate structures for the dead and then can't see past them. And there's something almost tender in how the show stages the end of it, in that both of them have spent 20 years waiting for the same moment and neither of them gets to enjoy it. Hector finally looks at him. That's the tell. 3 seasons of refusing to raise his eyes, and then he looks, and Gus knows instantly, and there's a fraction of a second where you can see him do the arithmetic. And then it's over for both of them. The other thing I keep circling is that Walt is the incidental party in all this. He's the delivery mechanism. Two men conducted a 20-year war, and the resolution arrives via a chemistry teacher who needed a problem solved that week. Walt takes credit for it afterwards, obviously. He tells Skylar he won. He didn't win anything. He got used by a man in a wheelchair who'd been waiting for someone exactly like him to walk through the door, which is a pattern, actually. Walt is convinced throughout that he's the one moving pieces, and a genuinely large proportion of his victories are other people's plans that he happened to be standing inside. Something worth chewing on. Right, let's widen out. Here's a thought I find quite comforting at this hour. The world of this show carried on without its main character, both inside the fiction and outside it. And in some ways, it got better. Theory number 81. Saul says two names in season 2 that nobody could explain for over a decade. Walt and Jesse kidnap him, put a bag over his head, and drive him into the desert. And Saul, panicking, starts babbling. It wasn't me, it was Ignacio. Are you working for Tuco? Neither name meant anything at the time. They were funny noises a frightened man made. Years later, both turn out to be real people with substantial histories, and Ignacio is Nacho Varga, and Lalo is Lalo Salamanca. And that scene in the desert stops being a joke and becomes a man having a flashback to the worst period of his life. Whether Gilligan had it planned, or whether the prequel writers went shopping in old dialogue is genuinely unclear. And honestly, at this point, I don't care. The effect is the same. Theory number 82. The prequel rewrote Gus without changing a frame of him. This is the trick I find most impressive about the whole enterprise. Nothing about Gus in Breaking Bad was altered. Same performance, same scenes, same edit. And yet, after you've seen the earlier material, the man in those scenes is different. The stillness reads differently. The visit to Hector's room reads differently. The line about family reads as much worse. That's a strange thing to have done to a finished television program. They went back and changed the meaning of it from underneath, using only new information, and every scene held. Theory number 83. Saul and Walt are the same story told with opposite honesty. Both men are enormously capable and stuck in small versions of their lives. Both find a way to use their talent illegitimately and discover they're very good at it. Both destroy the person who loves them most. The difference, and this is the whole thing, is that one of them admits it. Walt spends 5 seasons insisting it was for his family and gets to the truth in the last hour. Jimmy knows what he is by roughly episode 4 and spends the rest of his life negotiating with it. Which of those is worse is genuinely a matter of taste. I lean towards the man who lies, but I understand people who don't. Theory number 84. For years, the absence of Kim Wexler was itself a theory. Anyone paying attention worked out fairly early that a lawyer that's central to Saul's life, who is never once mentioned in Breaking Bad, is a very loud silence. The fan speculation ran to the obvious dark places, mostly involving a body. What actually happened is more interesting and much sadder than most of the guesses, and I'll not spoil it here for anyone who hasn't got to it. But I'll say this. The theory was correct in structure and wrong in mechanism. She is gone from his life in a way that means he cannot say her name. It just isn't the way people assumed. Theory number 85. El Camino quietly kills the dream theory. We talked about the idea that the finale is a dying fantasy in a frozen car. One of the neater arguments against it is simply that the follow-up film exists, and it proceeds directly from the events of that finale as though they happened, because they did. Jesse drives away from a compound full of dead men who died the way we saw them die. You can construct a version where the film is also imaginary. At that point, you're not really doing analysis anymore, you're just declining to accept the program. Theory number 86 is a joke that refuses to die, and I love it. Hayul is back home in New Orleans after being released from the safe house. He's put in a room by Ed under a protective arrangement and told to sit tight, and then everyone who knew he was there either dies, flees the country, or gets fired within about 48 hours. Nobody comes back for him. As far as the text of Breaking Bad is concerned, Huel Babino is still sitting on that bed with the telly on. He does turn up alive later, so it's resolved. But for about a decade, the fandom's official position was that a very large man was waiting patiently in a motel room for the DEA to remember him. And I'd like to say I've moved on from that, and I haven't. Theory number 87. 2 men were hiding in America at the same time and never knew it. Walt spends months in a cabin in New Hampshire with a generator-powered television and only Ed's brief visits for company, waiting to die. And Saul, having taken the vacuum repairman's offer, is working in a shopping center in Omaha under another name, going home to a small flat, watching the news. Roughly the same months, same country, both of them ruined by the same year of the same city. Neither of them aware the other one is out there doing the identical thing, which is sitting very still and being someone else. Theory number 88. The Empire outlived him. People talk about Walt's ending as though the operation dies with him, and it doesn't, not really. Madrigal is an international conglomerate with subsidiaries across several continents. Lydia is one employee handling one product line in one region. Walt removes Lydia and Todd and Jack's crew, which is an enforcement arm and a couple of cooks. The machine that Gus plugged into was always bigger than Gus, and it was always bigger than Walt. That's genuinely bleak if you sit with it. He conquered a department. Theory number 89. Badger and Skinny Pete are the 2 people the story is kind to, and it's on purpose. They're comic relief. They're the daft ones. They also, in the end, are the ones who help Jesse when there's nothing in it for them at all, and who put their own necks out for a friend at the point where every other relationship in this show has curdled into money or fear. The theory is that the writers deliberately kept them uncorrupted as a control group. Everybody else in this world gets worse. Those 2 don't, because they never wanted anything except to be all right and have a nice time, which turns out to be the only survivable ambition in Albuquerque. Theory number 90. The subject was never crime. I'd argue the whole franchise, across everything, is about consequence and specifically about delay. The gap between doing a thing and paying for it. Walt's bill lands at the end of his own countdown. Jimmy's lands decades later in Omaha over a bin. Gus's lands a very long time after a garden in Mexico. Nobody in this universe gets away with anything. They just get to wait a while first, and the waiting is what the shows are actually about. Now, let's do the mad ones. Something I've been circling all evening without saying directly. This show only works because of where it's set, and that was very nearly an accident. Breaking Bad was originally going to be in Riverside, California. It ended up in Albuquerque largely because of New Mexico's film incentives, which is about as unromantic an origin as you can get for one of the most distinctive-looking programs ever made. A tax break produced the desert, and then the desert produced everything else. The enormous flat horizons, the sense of being able to see somebody coming from a mile away and still not being able to do anything about it. The fact that you can drive 20 minutes out of a normal suburb and be somewhere nobody will ever find you. Half the show's plot mechanics depend on that geography being true. It also gives the series its strange emptiness. There are hardly any crowds in Breaking Bad. Car parks are half full, restaurants have 3 customers, the DEA office has about 11 people in it. Everything feels slightly underpopulated, which makes the small cast feel like the entire world, which is exactly the effect you want when your story is about a man who thinks he's the most important person alive. There's a fan observation, and I think it's just an observation rather than a theory, that Albuquerque in this show functions as a character who doesn't want anything. Everywhere else in crime drama has an appetite. New York wants money, Los Angeles wants fame, Baltimore wants out. Albuquerque just sits there in the heat and lets people do things in it. The city itself, incidentally, has had a genuinely complicated relationship with all of this. There are tours, there's a place selling Blue Rock sweets, there's the house with the fence we talked about earlier. An entire local economy grew up around a fictional meth operation, which is either a wonderful story about art and place or a slightly grim one depending on your mood. And I go back and forth depending on how late it is. The last thing I'll say about setting is about the sky, and then I promise I'll stop. This show shoots upwards constantly. Time lapses of clouds, low angles into that enormous washed out blue, the plane crash happening overhead, the pizza on the roof, Walt looking up in the garden. It keeps putting its characters at the bottom of very large frames. I don't think there's a theory in that so much as a habit. But it does mean that a program about a man who wanted to be enormous spends most of its running time making him look extremely small against a lot of sky. Which, if you'd like a nice thought to fall asleep on, is not a bad one. Quick thought while we're between sections, because I've been assembling this for weeks and it only occurred to me near the end. There's a category of Breaking Bad theory that barely exists, and its absence is interesting. Almost nobody theorizes about what happens next. That's unusual. Most fandoms of this size are absolutely stuffed with continuation theories. What happened to this character? Where did that one go? What's the state of things 10 years on? And there is some of it here, obviously mostly around Jesse and around Skylar and the kids, but it's thin compared to the enormous volume of theorizing about what was already on screen. I think that's because the show closed its own doors quite firmly. Everyone with anything left to do is either dead or has been explicitly relocated. There's no dangling network, no unfinished war, no faction waiting in the wings. Even the money is accounted for, down to the last few million. Which is why the theorizing went inward instead, into wallpaper and color and episode titles. The fandom had nowhere else to put its energy, so it went archaeological on the text it already had. The other thing I've noticed is how much of the theory culture around this show is about assigning blame. Whose fault was it? Was it the healthcare system? Was it Gretchen and Elliot? Was it Gus for making the offer? Was it Jesse for being available? Was it Skylar for being unsupportive? Which is a reading I find genuinely mad, but which had real currency for years. And I think the show anticipated all of it, because the finale exists specifically to close that argument down. It has Walt sit in a kitchen and take the whole thing on himself, out loud, in plain language, at the exact moment it would have been easiest to blame someone else. It's the writers reaching through and going, right, we've watched you do this for 5 years, and here's the answer, and you're not going to like how simple it is. We'll get to that properly in a bit. But it's worth noticing that this is a show that ends by refusing to be a mystery, and which then spent the next decade being treated as one anyway. Anyway, enough of that. Some of these next ones are absolutely daft, and I've been looking forward to them. Theory number 91. The cancer was psychosomatic. The argument is that Walt's illness tracks his resentment. He's diagnosed at the lowest, most humiliated point of his life, and then goes into remission around the time he's built something and feels powerful. And it comes back when everything starts collapsing again. Now, that's not how lung cancer works, and the show gives entirely ordinary medical explanations. But the timing does line up in a way that's a bit uncanny, and I include it because there's a decent metaphor buried in a bad theory. The thing eating him from the inside did get better when he stopped feeling small. Theory number 92 isn't really a theory, it's just a chain of events that most people don't hold in their head all at once. Walt caused the plane crash. He lets Jane die. Jane's father, Donald, is an air traffic controller. He goes to pieces, understandably, and goes back to work too early and makes a mistake, and 2 aircraft collide over the city. Walt is standing in his garden when it happens. He looks up. He has no idea he's looking at his own work, and he never finds out because nobody in the story ever connects those 2 things except the audience. That's the show's clearest statement of position, I think. Consequence doesn't need you to be aware of it. It doesn't even need you to be in the room. Theory number 93. Walt Jr. becomes the next Heisenberg. Everyone had this one around 2011. The logic was that the kid was being set up. The name, the resentment, the father he idolizes, the eventual discovery, it felt inevitable. There were long forum threads about how the final season would end with him picking up the hat. And it never happened, and the show was completely right not to do it. That would have been a tidy circle in a program that has no interest in tidy circles. He just finds out his dad's a monster and gets on with being a teenager whose life has been detonated. Theory number 94. The ricin was always meant for Walt. Enormously popular prediction and a sound one. The show plants a poison and keeps it alive for 4 seasons, and the obvious literary move is for the man to take his own medicine. Several very good critics called it. The show declined. Walt uses it on Lydia and dies of a bullet from his own machine, which is arguably the same point made with better engineering. He is killed by his own device either way. The device is just larger and stupider than anyone predicted. Theory number 95 is the dark mirror of theory 2, and it uses identical logic to arrive somewhere much worse. Jesse did make it to Alaska. The reasoning is the same. The ending is too clean, the escape too total, the freedom too complete for a character who has been punished for 5 years without pause. So the theory says he died somewhere on that road, and the drive north is the last thing his brain produced. I don't accept it. But I think it's worth noticing that fans apply this logic exclusively to endings they can't quite believe they were allowed to have. It's not really a theory about the show. It's a theory about how much good news we think we're owed. Theory number 96. Every character in Breaking Bad is a version of Walt. Gus is Walt with discipline and no ego. Jack is Walt with the appetite and none of the intelligence. Gale is Walt with the talent and none of the resentment. Hank is Walt with a badge and a conscience. Even Ted is Walt on a smaller scale, cooking books instead of drugs, in over his head for exactly the same reasons. Once you see it, the show turns into a hall of mirrors where the protagonist keeps meeting slightly rearranged versions of himself and killing most of them. Theory number 97. It's a Western, not a crime drama. A Western wearing a crime drama's clothes. The desert, the standoffs, the man with no name inventing himself, the code, the town that isn't big enough. The final episode is scored by Marty Robbins singing El Paso, which is a cowboy ballad about a man who kills someone over a woman, flees, and rides back into town knowing it will finish him. The finale is titled after the woman in that song. It's also an anagram of finale, which Gilligan has admitted required him to bend the spelling slightly, and I find that admission delightful. He wanted it both ways and just quietly adjusted a name until it worked. Theory number 98, and now we slow down, because these last 3 are the ones I actually think about. Ozymandias was the plan the whole time. The Shelley poem is about a traveler finding 2 enormous stone legs in a desert and a shattered face nearby, and an inscription boasting about the works of a mighty king. And around it, nothing. Flat sand in every direction. The empire is so completely gone that the only evidence it existed is a broken advert for itself. The show named its best episode after that poem. Cranston recorded a reading of it for a trailer, and the episode does exactly what the poem does. It takes everything Walt built and removes it in under an hour, and then leaves him in a desert with nothing but the claim. Whether the writers had the title picked in season 1, I doubt. But somebody knew fairly early that this was the shape of it, because the show is built to arrive there. Walt's entire project is a monument, and monuments are the least durable things people make. Theory number 99. Walt Jr. is the actual protagonist. It sounds silly at first, and I've come around to it completely. A protagonist isn't necessarily the person doing things. It can be the person the story happens to, the one whose situation is transformed, the one who ends the story knowing something they didn't know at the start. Walt does things constantly and learns almost nothing until the final hour. His son does almost nothing and has his entire understanding of his own life demolished and rebuilt. He starts the story with a father he's proud of. He ends it having refused that man's money, having told him to die, and having taken the name Flynn. And crucially, he's the only person in the show who ends up with an accurate picture of events. Skylar knows some of it, Marie knows some of it. Flynn is the one who ends up seeing his father clearly without illusions and choosing accordingly. That's an arc. It's just an arc that mostly happens off to one side while a man in a hat blows things up. Theory number 100. Walter White told the truth once, and it explained everything, and we've spent a decade theorizing around it anyway. Right at the end, in the kitchen of that house, Skylar tells him not to say it was for the family again. She can't hear it another time. And he stops, and there's a pause, and he says, I did it for me. I liked it, I was good at it, and I was alive. That's it. That's the answer, and it was there the whole time. Every theory in this video, including the good ones, including the ones I genuinely believe, is in some sense an attempt to find a more complicated explanation for a man who eventually gave a very simple one. He wasn't a good man corrupted. He wasn't a victim of the healthcare system, though that's the reading a lot of people prefer. He wasn't a chess player. He was a clever, bitter man who found something he was excellent at, and who felt fully alive for the first time in 25 years, and who was willing to trade everyone he knew to keep feeling that way. No hat, no chemistry, no metaphor. Just a man in a kitchen saying the thing out loud to the only person left who'd stand there and hear it. Which is a fairly quiet note to end 100 of these on, and I think that's about right. There's no grand unified theory of Breaking Bad waiting at the end. There's just a man who told the truth once, and a lot of us who've spent a decade looking for something more interesting than that. So that's the lot of them, all 100 in no particular order and with no particular conclusion, which feels correct for the subject. I'll say this before I go. What I keep coming back to with Breaking Bad is how small it is. One city, one short run of television, about 9 people who matter, a chemistry teacher and a lad who couldn't pass his class. No enormous mythology, no map of the world. It just looked very closely at a handful of people for 2 years of their lives and refused to look away, and that turned out to be enough to keep us all picking at it 15 years later. That's the thing about the theories, really. Half of them exist because the show left space, and the other half exists because it left so little that we started inventing more to have something to do. I've got a better Call Saul version of this in the works, because there's easily another 100 in there, and some of them are properly obscure. And I'd quite like to do a full evening on Gus Fring at some point, just him, the whole thing, chilly onwards. But that's for another night. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.